Why, hello there. And little lad, were you staring at my fingers? Would you like me to tell you the story of left hand, right hand, the story of good and evil? H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old Brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. These fingers got veins that run straight through the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now let me show you the story of life. Those fingers, dear hearts, it's always a warring and a tugging. One again together, now watch 'em. Old brother left hand, he's a fighting. And it's looking like love's a goner. But wait a minute, hot dog, yes, love's a winning. Yes, sirree, love's a winning. And old left hand hate is out for the count.
You've never seen it.
I've never seen it.
Oh my.
So, back on the ever-expanding topic of this show of classic film. Now, classic directors. Some people view more directors as more important than others, but overall, Hollywood is full of an eclectic bunch of people making a wide variety of movies. You have people like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, David Lynch, all of these separate people, which we have all brought up several times on the show, making various different kinds of movies for all these different kinds of audiences. You know, Lucas started out making some more experimental, weird sci-fi with THX, moving on to more traditional comedies at the advice/bet of Francis Ford Coppola and made American Graffiti. And then he moved on to Star Wars, which became such a mainstream hit that he never stopped making it. But I think one of the more interesting subjects to kind of talk about are the films that would end up becoming classics that were reviled upon their release. It's a fairly large-sized list, and I'm not going to name all of them, but you would be surprised by the amount that are already on this list. Just to name a few: Citizen Kane, The Thing, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, Blade Runner, It's a Wonderful Life, and movies like The Wizard of Oz were not only movies that financially disappointed and in some cases even bankrupt the studio that they were made for, but also were just poorly received by critics upon their release.
Sometimes it's just people don't get it. Other times it's just the subject is a little bit too far ahead of its time. Sometimes just people are bigoted and shitty and don't get it. You know,
it's one of those things where, like the film we're watching today, sometimes the audience just doesn't necessarily connect with the material, and sometimes the educated of the time, who are supposed to dictate good and bad taste towards the general public, don't necessarily have the words to describe what they're doing, or they just don't, as you said, get it like at all.
yeah, the ministers of science and religion and all that sort of thing.
You fucking get it. The film we are watching today was ridiculed upon its release, and it was the last film that the director and formerly famous actor Charles Laughton ever directed in his life. Which is an even bigger shame because on top of being the last thing he ever made, it was also his directorial debut.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. A one-shot, Jesus.
Yeah, no. The film we're about to watch today stars a young Billy Chapin and an even younger star, Sally Jane Bruce, Shelley Winters, who you may most know as the mother in Stanley Kubrick's Lolita. She is at her talent peak in this fucking movie.
Oh, okay.
She is an absolute fucking marvel for the bit that she's in it. And of course, the wonderfully and ghoulishly evil Robert Mitchum as our lead villain. Without further ado,
We all know that I don't have many guesses for a lot of these classical films. Love, hate. Let's see. Oh, I got nothing. My studies have failed me. Just bust in and see. The Night of the Hunter. Okay, so
The Night of the Hunter, the 1955 film based off of the book of the same name. This is my second favorite movie of all time. This movie means a whole lot to me. And as I said, while ridiculed upon its release in modern times, it was praised by directors such as Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, and Spike Lee, who was the person I learned about this from. This is one of the films that in his filmmaking course that he teaches at NYU, I believe, is like one of the primary courses of study.
Yeah. Which is, you know, if all the greats are looking at you and saying, this is a really great movie, maybe you should just, like, listen to it.
No, it's one of those things where, like, when I've heard Spike Lee talk about this, when I was looking for stuff that he recommended, it was stuff like this on the waterfront, but he brought this up and was like, okay, what's one of the best, who's one of the best directors of all time? And he's like, Charles Laughton. It's like, didn't that guy make like only one movie? And it's like, yes, Charles Laughton.
I know, as you mentioned, Charles Laughton's only film he directed, but it's...
Which is a crime, because, you know, he didn't make another one because it's got such a bad reaction from critics, and nobody went to see it.
That seems to be a theme here.
Yes, yeah. But, you know, wow.
Great films that did not really do box office, but this is...
With
film's amazing. And then over the years, this film has just grown and grown and grown in stature.
The tragedy is he wasn't around to know how successful that film became.
I mean, I've read many books about this movie, and a lot of people say that this broke his heart.
Yeah.
And he didn't live very much long after the release of the film.
And it's because this movie is like one of those films that is just so influential because of like style, tone, cinematography, what it does with compositing. Everything is just so ahead of everything else that was there at the time, while also being this thematic, divulging horror into what religion does to people.
Yeah, no, Colin, you've told me a lot about this movie over the years.
Yes.
And you've mentioned it a lot. It's at the top of your letterbox, and I've always avoided like any of your reviews for it, specifically because it's for the list. But I just know you're incredibly passionate about this film.
Yeah. And
you've said many times it's you core. It's like one of those fucking films that just like represents. It's one of those films that just like represents a huge chunk of what you like in movies. So
yeah.
I'm really excited to get into it and to see how well that stacks up to what I imagine it be.
Yeah, because I love Universal monster movies, you know that. And Robert Mitchum is playing his own cinematic boogeyman.
A Universal monster movie? You wouldn't tell that from the title.
It's not a Universal monster movie, but it has the same sort of high contrast black and white cinematography, using a lot of similar themes of fear of the unknown, you know, a lot of townsfolk sort of being foolish to what they don't understand and using that as a fuel for hatred. And also kind of the use of like religious symbolism, you know, it takes place from the perspective of children, so it's like a terrifying southern Gothic fairy tale, which is unique because most of the time those Universal monster movies took place in like an Eastern European kind of setting. So taking that and putting it in the American South, specifically among like Bayou.
Yeah, like a proper Hansel and Gretel with all the fixins not cut out, but set in fucking New York City.
Yeah, and
circa 20.
And it has like one of the scariest boogeymen of the silver screen, Robert Mitchum as Preacher Harry Powell, which is one of my favorite film characters of all time. So do you really know anything about this movie, Tony? Or?
Like I said, I've avoided like spoilers about it because you've said it's going to be for the list. It's going to be like a big thing. It's one of your favorite movies. So I try not to like look into spoilery type stuff for it. So I don't really know. Yeah. So we're going in mostly blind.
Okay, awesome. If you haven't seen this movie, guys, and you want to watch this episode, please go ahead and actually watch this movie. I would really recommend it. It's quite a treat, and the Criterion transfer, while not like straight up a 4K, is great. It's the UCLA print.
Nice.
So they've taken very good care of this. I believe Martin Scorsese had something to do with restoring this. So go ahead and please watch it. It's a fucking masterpiece. All right, let's go head on over back to my place and check out the Charles Laughton 1955 Gothic masterpiece, Night of the Hunter.
Never told you thrown it in the river, did he?
I can hear you whispering, children, so I know you're down there. I can feel myself getting awful mad.
Here is all the passion and suspense, the heart-pounding warmth of the best-selling novel that gripped millions.
Whoa, wake up! Come on!
Superb, unforgettable performances by an extraordinary array of talent.
Figured I was gone, huh?
Run, hide in the staircase. Run quick. Ruby, shit. What do you want?
I want them kids.
I'm giving you to the count of 3 to get out of here. Then I'm coming across the kitchen shooting you.
The combined powers of Paul Gregory and Charles Laughton brought the King Mutiny Court-Martial to Broadway. Now the screen receives that same creative, electrifying impact. The Night of the Hunter.
So Tony, we were church kids growing up.
Yeah. Some of us like more of our own volition than others, I think. Some of us, one of us were just dragged there because that's what our parents already did, and the other one went there because he was a good little Christian boy and found like magic and hope and something in the church, mostly just community, I think. And we both went to church for quite a long time.
How'd that make you feel, Tony, that movie we just watched?
Oh, Jesus. It's a lot. Oh my God. So there are a lot of types of people of the faith out in the world. They could be of literal, like the faith of some Abrahamic religion, right? Or they could just be like faithful in some higher power, faithful in something out there, right? I think there are people that are blinded by faith or who are just plain stupid and trying to fill in their stupidity with like some higher power, with some faith in some greater thing somewhere.
Lynch him, Bluebeard!
And there are people that balance between not being dumb, but like taking faith and using it as a guiding line for their life.
March, mister, I'm not fooling.
All right. But you haven't heard the last of Harry Powell yet.
These types of people like know not to let a wolf into their house, as it were. They know what to look for, but they're not looking for wolves out in every person that they see on a daily basis. They just balance out the understanding that there are terrible people out there and the faith in humanity and like live their lives accordingly.
Okay, that's all well good. But my question still is,
Yes.
how did that make you feel?
Made me feel, Lord, it made me feel. It made me feel fucking angry at times, and it also made me feel very, very like faithful and like it restored my like, oh God, how do I put it? Because I'm angry at some of these people in this movie.
Yeah.
They're just incredibly dumb.
Okay, before we get into that, I guess we should say,
Lord.
could you summarize the plot of 1955's and Charles Laughton's Gothic masterpiece, Night of the Hunter?
In short, there's a man who travels around the country guided by either some form of mental illness or some crazed delusion that he's a man of God, and he uses like platitudes and stories that he's built up over his time on this earth to marry widowed women who have money and kill them and take the money and move on to the next woman.
What's wrong? Hey! Hey!
He finds another home, hoping to just make another big score, and everything goes wrong for him, and where normally his wolf in sheep's clothing act guides him straight towards getting this money and to getting away with all the horrific things that he does.
Hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree. It's love that won. And old left-hand hate is down for the count.
I never heard it better told. I wish every soul in this community could get the benefit. Oh, you just got to stay for our picnic Sunday.
He runs into one little boy who has a bit of smarts that's willing to like see through the disguise, and it follows his journey, like trying to save his little sister and this money, and just, you know, live their fucking lives free of like torment from this monster.
And to sort of make one correction on that, the thing I like about this is everything is very purposeful, and everything that he ends up going through, the sort of hellish lifestyle that he lives, is sort of rewarded by his own belief system that he is anointed by God to do all these awful things.
Lord, I am tired. Sometimes I wonder if you really understand. Not that you mind the killings. Your book is full of killings. But there are things you do hate, Lord. Perfume-smelling things, lacy things, things with curly hair.
He gets caught not for murdering someone, but because they found a car that he stole.
Yeah.
There are too many of them. You can't kill a world.
You driving a touring car with a Moundsville license?
Which only gives him 30 days in the slammer. Which then gets him bunked with someone on death row.
Yeah. That's
to
where
get the hangman's noose, where he finds the man who is the father of these children.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even like stumble upon them. It's like in his mind, I'm given divine providence.
Lord, you sure knowed what you was doing when you put me in this very cell at this very time. A man with $10,000 hid somewhere, and a widow in the making.
And with that, you sort of answered it in the opening, but Tony, you know, not just how it made you feel. What are your overall thoughts on Night of the Hunter?
Night of the Hunter is a really, really, really good fairy tale. It's horrifying, it's haunting, and it's got like just dark enough imagery to like, you know, to fulfill that like Hansel and Gretel original story, like evil fucking nightmare shit. But it doesn't go like full cynical about it. It's not like everything ends in tragedy and horror. It swings it back around to have like a message about faith and about like understanding and about all these sorts of fucking things. It's a really good film, and it's really like well shot, and it's really fucking like everything about it is like very, very solid.
Yes.
You were talking to me briefly about like the cinematography, especially how it connects to like Hereditary. Like one of the first like big things I noticed is the dollhouse sort of like construction of sets where everything's very 2D.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're just like stuck here in this cramped, tiny little space.
Yeah.
Shut off from the world and shut out from everything else. And just surrounded in darkness. There is no hope. The wolf is in your home.
Yeah, and where Hereditary is using that as sort of like a thematic like storytelling method to sort of play with this idea that Toni Collette's character uses miniatures as a form of control, because it's the only thing she has control of left in her life as she's grieving her mother. This movie is using it as sort of like the doll is the all-consuming thing in this movie. It's where the money is hidden that sort of start this whole like journey into depravity. But as a result, it's like now everyone is sort of living in this devil's fucking playhouse. And with that, you end up having this idea where stuff is like vignetted, and houses are like, rooms are silhouetted from like a profile standpoint, and it sort of supports this idea that I think the movie is trying to like visually convey, that you're not necessarily viewing this from a very literal standpoint. This is a film from the like perspective of two children, two very scared fucking children. Your cellar doesn't look like a cellar when you're a kid. Your cellar looks like the pit of hell that this fucking demon is forcing you down into. And I don't know, everything about that to me just kind of adds to this overall sense of dread. And if you're looking at this movie from the correct perspective, I'm sure someone out there could be like, this isn't dated, this movie's not scary, but if you're willing to just put suspension of disbelief to like the side for a second and just put yourself in these children's shoes, the film goes from something that's like just kind of scary from like looking at it from a dated perspective to scary on sort of like a mythical level to me.
Don't never sleep.
Children have a very specific way of looking at the world, and even like, you know, regular people are the fucking scariest goddamn thing in the world.
Yeah.
They always depict Pal in a like jet black suit, and with the Colonel Sanders black tie. Always like it's the look of a preacher, but when you put it right next to regular folk in just, you know, floral dresses and light tan like regular suits, he's like incredibly intimidating, and he stands out in a way that like it's so obvious to the kids but is not obvious at all to all these adults who are just like used to the idea that, you know, so there are some terrible people out there, but not in our community, not in our home.
She'll not be back. I reckon I'm safe in promising you that.
And I think that plays into kind of like one of the huge factors of the horror in this, which is the kids are noticing all this stuff, and the adults are all, from their perspective, kind of like, not just impotent like imbeciles, but it seems like they're actively trying to hurt them. And when you get to the point of the ending of the film, where he has this whole town brainwashed so viciously that they're willing to do what most like followers of religious fanatics tend to do, which is they're willing to fucking mob down and destroy anyone who says anything different than what they're preaching. You know, I think this movie is a gigantic warning against that kind of shit to begin with, and from what I understand, so is the book, and the author of the book co-wrote the first draft of the screenplay, and basically he was asked to sort of like, by Charles Laughton, the director, to come on and sort of like, what is your idea for sort of like the visuals that you were writing in this? And this gets into the cinematography, which you were asking me about. What sort of like were the ideas for visuals that you were wanting to convey? And he went out and hand drew all of these separate images that he had in his hand, or that he had in his head. He mailed them off to Laughton as he was in pre-production for the movie, and he used those as storyboards. And then proceeded to like those shots where it's like you're getting like the profile shots of the boat and everything, and you have stuff like the spider web in the foreground, and then the boat in the background, or the frog in the foreground, and everything, all these animals and everything, but there's no depth of field, so nothing's really out of focus. Everything's out of focus. That's the compositing I was talking about, because you're getting these sort of like unreal kind of storybook-esque shots.
I was gonna say, it looks like a drawing in like a kid's fucking like, in like a Scooby-Doo book or whatever.
Yeah, an illustration. But the best part about like Night of the Hunters, that was just a novel. It was like I don't know if it was like a dime store horror novel or anything like that, but it wasn't even like a kid's book or anything like that, but I think it like perfectly captures that kind of dread that you feel. And from what I understand, when I was watching a lot of the special features in the Criterion for this and rewatching it in prep, a lot of the people who were like film scholars grew up with this. This was like their first horror movie. And for a kid, that's like perfect, because this guy is automatically kind of the embodiment of what you would kind of want as sort of like a horror movie villain as a kid. It's like, it's scary, but scary to a way that's specifically scary to a kid, and not something that's going to, I think, like destroy them mentally like a lot of other horror movies would.
Yeah, there's no like big jump scares really. I mean, there's kind of one towards the very end, but it's not like
It's more so atmospheric, which, and with that, like, what are your thoughts on the performances you know, we got the kids, we got Shelley White, the mother, and then we have actors obviously like Robert Mitchum. We have everyone in the townsfolk, specifically the two people who own that Spoon's place, the dessert shop. Uncle Billard, I think is his name. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Mr. and Mrs. Spoons.
Yeah.
I like the Spoons quite a bit in the very because they always like represent how like inklings of fear and, you know, they always represent how like inklings of fear and mistrust of people can be like squashed down by like just their general image and by like this narrative that they can build up if you're a very good liar and you're very good like with words and with like novelty, right?
Yeah.
You know, and he's a great fucking character at doing that. But Mr. and Mrs. Spoons, they show up every so often and they say, oh, well, maybe there's something wrong with him. And then she always smacks him right back down.
And that's sort of like, I guess the thing that like I think ages the best about that is sort of this fanaticism, you know, not to get too political, but it's one of those things where like people who like crave traditionalism, which is very clearly what this woman is.
Willa Harper, there are certain plain facts of life that adds up just like 2 + 2 makes 4, and one of them is this. No woman is able to raise growing youngsters alone. The Lord meant that job for 2.
I see, I just don't want a husband.
Those kinds of people will tolerate a lot of moral stuff that goes against like their own like religious standings, if it means that. You know, our last president, all he had to do was hold a fucking Bible a couple times.
Hold the Bible and hug the flag.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, it's like you had this entire country of like God-fearing Christians putting aside the fact that he's doing this fucking horrendous, heinous shit.
Yeah.
That we have proof of. So it rings true more so like even now than I think it probably would have back then.
Yeah, the easiest, the like best solution for a wolf in sheep's clothing is to take the clothing off, show everyone who the wolf truly is, and then stampede.
Yeah, if we're sort of still on this like, I guess like vote of performances and everything, I kind of wanted to get on to like my reading of Powell as a character. For me at least, Powell isn't like just sort of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I think he's sort of like the wolf in sheep's clothing. I think Powell, if not literally or necessarily metaphorically, I think Powell is the devil.
An ungrateful child is an abomination before the eyes of God. The world is fast going to damnation because of impudent young'uns a flying in the face of age.
There is like an old saying in church that would come up a lot. You know, the devil's working through you. Like that's the devil putting words in your mouth, the devil like making you rebel against authority. Whenever somebody did something like listen to rock music or distrust somebody older than 30, right?
Yeah.
But
Charlton Heston, thank you.
That's the spirit. Keep 'em flying.
What?
The flags of discontent. Remember, never trust anybody over 30.
I think, yeah, no, Powell is like the literal incarnation of that, right?
Yeah.
He's not a kind of devil-like figure like with horns or a big, huge monster. He's a more realistic version of what the devil would be like if he acted in our world, which is just putting horrific, terrible things into someone and acting them out onto the world. And like, he's sly, he's very like educated in a way. He has like platitudes and like all these bits and pieces of information that he uses to build like a little mask for himself so that he can slip into these communities and seem so harmless and so fine. He's very different from this character, I realize now, but he reminds me a lot of Judge Holden.
Yeah.
It's a character from the Blood Meridian. It's a novel written by Cormac McCarthy. Holden is outwardly a monster. Yeah. He's described as like a giant. He's like 6, 7, 8 feet tall. He's taller every time someone tells the story.
Yeah.
He's got white skin, not like albino, but pale, like monstrous white.
Yeah.
And he will go into town, start shit. He'll sow distrust in a community, and then he'll just end by like massacring people and like scalping people and taking their scalps out to the like military and selling them. He's outwardly and openly a wolf and a monster and a devil, and that's what makes him dangerous. But I think he's almost weirdly less realistic, obviously, and less dangerous in a way than a character like Powell, because Powell can just slide into a community and not be noticed, or like his evil acts cannot be noticed by like people that are willing to put that aside for the aesthetic of like a big strong preacher man. He equally has this like facade and this mask of like godliness and knowledge that makes him seem like not a threat.
Why, you don't mean no impudence, do you, boy? Do you, boy? How many's the time poor brother Ben told me about these young'uns?
What'd he tell you?
Why, he told me what fine little lambs you and your sister both was.
And he doesn't play into the fact that he is also a threat. He believes firmly that he's a man of God and that all these horrible, awful things that he's doing are like good somehow, or that's been preordained by the Lord or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's just the devil acting through fucking a human being, which is the scariest thing, because he doesn't look like it. He's just, I mean, the way that this is told, like by the kids, it's very obvious. He walks around in a big black suit and no one else wears black in the whole movie. It's all like pastels and flowers, sundresses and stuff. Yeah. From the kids' view, he's obviously a monster, but everybody else is too naive or dumb to like know or care about it. Right? Yeah.
Which, is sort of the biggest fearing point from a child's perspective, is sort of when you notice something that no one else can fucking see. Mm-hmm. And it's just so clearly and obvious, and adults are telling you that you're the naive one. That's kind of like a tried and true method of like telling stories from the perspective of a kid. And what I think is so brilliant about sort of taking this like character who is sort of the devil, or the devil working through a man, is this kind of idea that like, if you're looking at it as the devil, okay, the devil was once God's right-hand man. He was a fucking angel, and God's most trusted angel on top of that. So what do we have to do about that? Well, you see, he's not uneducated and he's not bullshitting, because like every other angel, he's educated on this subject. He can use the words of God and inaccurately use them in a way that fucking spins it towards how he wants to fucking do.
Something that happens in many a church, even nowadays. Yeah, when they're talking about, other shit that doesn't actually make any fucking sense, where they're sort of spinning this idea that like something, as you said, like rock music is like the devil's work, when in reality they're not, or they're, fully aware that they're just spinning it to make their narrative. Give it 1,400 years and the words of Caesar will mean nothing. Yeah. They'll mean something totally different. Yeah.
What a wonderful day! What a wonderful day!
And with Pal, the thing I find so interesting is like him being the devil, and being this sort of like the devil himself. He's imperfect and full of sin and full of lust. You have the opening shot, one of the opening shots, where he's in that strip show and talking about how God hates the panties and the frills and laces of women and everything, and he's watching it and he's holding the switchblade next to his crotch, and he fucking pops it open through his pocket and it looks like a fucking phallic symbol. They originally shot the scene, and the studio told them they had to reshoot it due to censors, where it was inside his pants pocket, not his coat pocket. But they told him, you can't fucking do that. That is not fucking okay.
It's a little bit on the nose.
I don't give a shit. I wish they would have. He's talking to that young teenage girl, and she's like, don't you think I have the most beautiful eyes you think you ever see? And right before he walks off, he straightens his fucking hand out in his pocket, and the fucking switchblade goes off, and then he walks off into the fucking distance. It's fucking disgusting. And sort of with that, it's like the facade breaking through of him being this animalistic demon. Every time he gets hurt or frustrated, it's not a man scream that comes out of him. It's this animalistic, like, howl.
I'm giving you to the count of 3 to get out of here, then I'm coming across the kitchen shooting you.
like a fucking dog that's got its leg like run over or something. And it's legitimately like fucking unnerving and horrifying. And I fucking like when he's watching the kids like run off from across the river and everything, and he just can't really do anything to catch up to them.
If Powell is acting as like the devil working through a man, or even as the devil himself, I think she is working as like the Lord, like working through people in the way that like is actually realistic and meaningful.
Yeah.
She actually reads the Bible. She actually learns from experience and is willing to balance her like faith in God and faith in like humanity with her like fear and distrust of humans in general.
It's a hard world for little things.
Yeah, she's willing to like take the step further to question things, and unfortunately, in a lot of religious sects now, to like question things is like almost immoral and bad. Like, there's a reason why Catholic priests read the Bible and don't encourage you to read it yourself.
Well, even then, it's the reason why when you like read the Bible in Baptist circles, it's their version of the Bible, and they give you very specific instructions, and then you discuss that, and then discuss why the version of the Bible that you brought in is wrong.
Yeah.
It's
like, God.
Yeah.
And she's smart, she's older, and she's like got age and experience and all these sorts of things, and is willing to stand up to protect her little hens, to protect the sheep from fucking. She's kind of like a little bit like a shepherd character almost.
Well, because it's the whole like wolf and like sheep analogy is being used throughout that. She's protecting a bunch of children, which are sheep. She is a literal shepherd protecting this flock throughout the movie, and that's kind of whenever you see them in a group, that's how they're fucking framed against that, is this tall woman with a bunch of children behind her. And with her character, I think one of the most interesting and I think better choices for her as like another protagonist to sort of introduce as like a side character. When you have a lot of characters like this that are sort of supposed to represent like the good of everything and sort of like the protective nature of like Christianity and God, a lot of times like their entire character will be that. And with a lot of fundamentalist Christians, that means taking everything from the Bible literally, even if it means destroying this kid's reality. In the moment where this kid sees a Bible, which he associates with trauma because of Powell, he leaves the room and she starts telling the story of Moses, obviously without the context of what this kid has gone through, but sort of trying to come in and like relax him and ease him up and let her know that this is a safe place. I'm not gonna hurt you. It tells him to get her an apple and bring him one too. And they start talking for a second, and he hasn't spoke to her the entire time they've been there. And then she starts to like talk to him, and he says like, what was that story you were talking about with the kings and the little and the queen that found him on the Nile River and everything? And she's just like, kings? There's only one king. Are you sure there wasn't two? And she for a second puts it down and realizes the like biblical accuracy of this is less important, and this will help you be at ease for the first time since you've fucking been here.
About them kings. And the queen found down in a sandbar that time on the skiff.
Kings? Well, there was only one king, honey.
I mind you said there was two.
Well, shoot now. Maybe there was. Yes, come to think of it, there was two.
It's creating a lesson out of something instead of just like blindly following the exact words of the text.
Yes.
Which have already been interpreted and reinterpreted over millennia. You know? And that's really, she is the end goal for this character, our roaming son, our lamb on the run.
Yes.
He starts out his, he's one of my favorite characters. I think he's like my favorite overall. Yeah. He starts out like a kid, usually does, with like general trust of everybody, with faith in everybody and innocence in his heart.
We don't really get to see much of that beforehand though.
Yeah,
is the thing, because like the first time we see him, it's already like his heart is hardened because his father, unfortunately, put this like mission in front of him. Like He introduces him to the root of all evil, which is money. And you're going to make this promise to me. He tells him, swear to me. A swear is a promise, which not the same fucking thing.
Listen to me, son. You've got to swear. Swear means promise. First swear you'll take care of little Pearl. Guard her with your life, boy. Then swear you won't never tell where the money's hid, not even your mom.
Which equating those two together and putting it in, once again, the hands of this authority figure that you love and respect and everything, that automatically is almost this kind of destructive force that's going to eat away at you. And the fact that, like, by the end, the final image of the movie, what is the actual sin, the evil being finally released from him, is him just throwing the money in the air saying, I don't care anymore.
Don't! Here!
John!
Dad, take it back. I don't want it, Dad. It's too much. Here!
And he sees the image of, like, Powell being taken up by the police, and it gives him this fucking PTSD flashback to watching his dad.
And it's a journey with him, like, just about losing all of his faith and all of his joy and all of his innocence on this, like, path to what he believes is an inevitable death. But he's, like, saved by just this regular ass normal woman who actually cares about people.
I'm a strong tree with branches for many birds. I'm good for something in this old world, and I know it, too.
And there's an implied whole backstory with her where she talks about, like, my son left me. I haven't heard from him since last Christmas. And clearly she's taken that to heart and is trying really hard to, whatever happened to be her son, to change that and be a good mother and raise all of these kids. Because when she recognizes that it's not just even these kids that this awful piece of shit has done this to, it's Ruby, this other girl, who he's just using as a conduit to get to these other fucking kids.
And I love how she's forgiven for that. Like, she goes and she thinks, oh, I'm gonna get beat, but as soon as she tells the truth,
didn't fucking do anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's...
And it's like she, I've been hanging out with boys. She says, oh, you're just looking for love, and helps her through that sort of thing.
And then
that she's
and then she tells her everyone needs love, and that shit's just...
And it's also, she's comfortable enough to come forward and tell, like, hey, there's this terrible thing that's gonna happen. There's this man I met that's a danger to us.
Yeah.
Where if you had shamed her for her behavior and skipping out on her like her
sewing
piano,
lessons
her
that
sewing
didn't exist to begin with.
Yeah. If you just beat her with a switch, then the man would have just shown up.
Yeah.
Holden would have just shown up and taken the kids and probably fucking killed all of them and called them, Powell. Excuse me, I keep making that.
It's all good. Did you see the Spike Lee connection in this movie?
The Spike Lee connection.
What do Powell's tattoos say?
Love and hate. So,
and do the right thing. Radio Raheem's Knuckles, he gives the verbatim speech.
Oh my God.
And he recontexts it. It's the same speech, but it's this entirely different context for the ending of that movie. And talking about, love and hate. And how it's this fucking war between each other, but it uses it for racial relations. It uses this as, like, in this almost actual biblical context.
You got the left hand on the ropes now, that's right. Yeah, ooh, it's a devastating right, and hate is hurt. Down, ooh, left hand hate, KO'd by love. If I love you, I love you. But if I hate you,
here it is, love and hate.
This movie has influence over lots and lots of things. I already talked about The Blood Meridian.
Yes.
It was made in like 1985, so I would not be surprised if that has some like serious connections. I have a film that I really liked. I've shown to Colin before. I wish I would have saved it for the list, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's called Shirin. It's called Ringing Bell, and it's the story of, like, a little lamb that is told, like, stay within the boundaries of the fence, and so long as you do that, the Wolf King won't come and get you.
Yeah.
And there's, like, that sort of connection in, like, the cynicism of this story, where faith and all these sorts of things fail, and the wolf comes and just fucking kills everybody anyways. It comes and kills his mother anyways. And that's what sets him off on this journey for, like, revenge. But I think that's sort of where it ends with Shirin. I just was, like, really taken aback by, like, And of course, these are all like biblical sort of things, so it's very possible that they didn't see it in that.
Even if they didn't see it, it's like inspiration takes place, and biblical is inspired by other religions, because all religion's just the same fucking story handed down through different cultures. It's all fucking the same. Lastly, saving the best for last thing we can't describe visually. Tony.
A lot of these are like orchestrations and reorchestrations of like a handful of themes. A lot of movies do that. They build up like these sort of themes for like walking around town, and that equates to faith and joy and all this sort of thing. Secondly, there's like all the very like, what is the word for when the music enters the actual plot? It's diegetic.
Yeah,
correct?
diegetic and non-diegetic. It's diegetic when it's in the world of the film.
The diegetic singing of like religious songs, and how like different verses are used to like mean very different things. Powell sings the male verse of leaning, whereas the Mother Goose kind of sings this.
She sings the female chorus, and that kind of, if you're looking at like fundamentalist Christianity, that's kind of this whole idea wrapped up in a nutshell of like, okay, like, he's mentioning all this stuff on a core basis that's like, this is about God. It's God and just God. But the word God in religious circles gets thrown around a lot. With fundamentalists, like the discussion of like Jesus and how that relates to like God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. It's this whole different thing. So if you're going out of your way to sing the other verses, singing about Jesus specifically leaning on him and him being like a protector, you're sort of vocalizing not just your knowledge on it, but your belief and like reliance on sort of, as she is herself, sort of like the sheep on the shepherd.
Leaning on the everlasting arms.
Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on Jesus, leaning on Jesus, leaning on the everlasting arms.
Powell's verse can be like manipulated and changed to mean many different things. But the other verse is much more like solid and very specific to religion and to a religious story, and it's really good when they do that sort of thing. All the diegetic like singing is really great. There's one song in particular that was really fucking powerful, and that is Pearl's little tune as they're floating down.
The lullaby that is being fucking sung, that whole sequence.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You heard me crying. It's like, it's one of those fucking scenes that just kind of embodies what this art form can do.
Once upon a time there was a pretty fly. He had a pretty wife, this pretty fly. But one day she flew away, She had two pretty children.
Pearl with her little doll is like the last little shred of hope and joy and innocence that they're carrying down this river, hoping for a different life and hoping for a better life, even if they don't necessarily believe it's ever gonna come. And she sings to herself to remind and to like calm down the like darkness and the cynicism that's growing up inside of her and up inside of her brother.
When they have to go to the barn where Powell catches up with them for a bit. Doesn't he ever start sleeping?
Doesn't he ever sleep?
No, which it's once again, it's just the movie vocalizing what the audience is thinking at that point. And you have that beautiful fucking perfect silhouetted shot of Powell on the horse up against the horizon, which isn't realistic like at all, but it's so fucking
perfect. Once again, like just if you saw that shot I think you get like a very strong inclination about what this movie's gonna be. And once again, diegetic music, singing, that whole fucking thing is like a specter that never fucking sleeps. It's haunting these kids. Yeah. That's a perfect shot to show somebody and like say, hey, you want to fuck around with this movie? Yeah. But the music's great. Music's good. Fucking goddamn, it all just comes together very nicely at the very end.
Yeah. So Tony, wrapping this up. Overall, you liked it, right?
We come to the very end and I say, Colin, you've wasted my time.
Yeah.
You've ended. I can't believe it. This is where the friendship ends. This is where we tear these curtains down and we call it a day. No, it's great. It's a classic. Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah. And poor Charles Houghton, unfortunately, made this, got such negative reviews that lost any kind of confidence that he could work on anything else, and then unfortunately died a few years later. And it really sucks that while it is nice that we saw this like singular kind of perfect work from him, it sucks that no further artistic expression was brought into this world from that man.
Yeah. Sometimes that just sort of happens. Sometimes you get a one-hit wonder and that's it. Yeah. And you move on from there. And if the dude's listening, I don't know how he'd be from wherever he is. I think he'd be proud to know that two jerks in front of fucking purple curtains are talking all about it.
No, these are black curtains. They don't know that.